So let me give you guys the quick and dirty on how co-functions work. So first, what are your usual trig functions?
Cosine, tangent, and sine.
Okay, so the usual functions are cosine, sine, and tangent, right? Okay, and what do these do? All three of these take what's to what? They take what as inputs? How about that? Angles, right? So all three of these map angles to ratios of sides, right? And specifically, cosine takes angles to the what? Adjacent over the hypotenuse, right? That's the ka part of SOHCAHTOA. And sine takes angles and turns them into opposite over the hypotenuse. And tangent takes an angle and turns it into
Jason.
OA. How do you spell TOA?
Yeah, opposite.
Opposite over adjacent, right? And remember, these are all in a right triangle.
Yeah.
You guys remember that? Okay, this is the usual. Co-functions are going to be cosecant, secant, and cotangent. Okay, so let me write down how to say those next to these, because otherwise we'll end up with all sorts of strange pronunciations. This thing is cosecant. This thing is secant. And this one, the one that makes the most sense, is cotangent. Okay, it's cool, these? These are not as important. I say that to you with all seriousness. I don't like to de-emphasize things, but these are not as important as cosine, sine, and tangent. Okay? The reason they're not as important is they're made out of cosine, sine, and tangent. Okay? So they do the same thing. So I'm going to put of x's on these. These x's are going to be the same as the inputs for cosine and sine. And there's one little trick you have to remember here, which is, what was the thing I told you before? There's no what in the world? Remember this? No.
No.
Wait,
Happiness?
say that. That was. There's no justice in the world. If there was, the one that started with C would go with the one that starts with C, right? But there's no justice in trigonometry. So the one that goes with C goes with sine. So cosecant is 1 over sine of x.
Okay.
Just trust me. It's just a definition.
Okay, okay.
Secant, what's that going to be?
Cosine?
That's going to be 1 over cosine of x. And at least there's justice with this one. Cotangent is
Tangent.
1 over tangent. Okay, so what do these mean? So these still take angles, right? Yeah, so these aren't inverses.
I don't know.
Right? You guys see that? These still take angles.
Do they just take the opposite, so it's the hypotenuse over adjacent?
Perfect. So this is sine, which is opposites and hypotenuses, right? When I do 1 over that fraction, I flip it over, right? So this gets me hypotenuse over the opposite. You guys cool with this? What's secant do? It takes angles and turns them into
Hypotenuse over adjacent.
the hypotenuse over the adjacent side. Okay, perfect. And tangent's going to take, or cotangent rather, is going to take angles and turn it into
Adjacent over opposite.
adjacent over opposite. You guys cool with this? So these are just kind of a bass-ackwards spelling of SOHCAHTOA, right? All you got to remember for this is that they flip the ratio over and that there's no justice in trigonometry. So the one that starts with C goes with sine, the one that starts with S goes with cosine. You guys okay with that? Otherwise, you do these exactly the same way, right? If you've got a standard angle, you draw the triangle, you read the ratio off of it. Cool? Yeah.
Are those also restricted to right triangles?
Yeah, these are also restricted to right triangles. You can get them off the unit circle again, but it's much more complicated.
Okay.
I'm not going to show you the unit circle pictures for these. The reason I'm showing you these at all is that they're nice in calculus in a couple of ways. We don't have the tools for it right now, so I'm basically just mentioning, hey, these are a thing. They're not actually so complicated. You just got to remember this flip-flop that happens. Right? There's two flip-flops here. There's one between the kind of starting letters that associate them backwards, and then there flips the fraction over. You guys cool with this? The other reason I'm showing you these is that these are not the inverse functions. Right? So another way I could write cosecant is I could write that as sine of x to the -1. You guys see that? This is a -1 power, not an inverse. So this thing and this thing are not the same. You guys see that? This is an unfunction idea, which is fundamentally kind of dorky and we'll have to straighten out. And this is just a flipped over trig function, which makes perfect sense, although it's awkward. You guys see that? Okay. The heyday with these things was in stellar navigation. So way, way back in the day, there was a thing called a sextant or something, which read one of these angles off of the sky. Cool? Trust me, there's a use, but only if you're navigating by the stars in a sailboat. Good? Cool? Everyone can realize that that's might be relevant to their life, but probably isn't right now.
So field trip?
Field trip? No. That's why God invented GPS.